Now what the hell do you think you're doing with that tin star, boy?
Watch that boy shit, redneck. You talking to the sheriff of Rock Ridge.
The shocking story behind Blazing Saddles reveals a truth that almost no one knows. Gene Wilder, in his legendary role as the Waco Kid, was never supposed to be in the movie. He was a desperate, last-minute replacement for another famous actor, who collapsed on the very first day of filming, sending the entire production into a tailspin. How did a film on the brink of failure become an all-time classic? And what was the secret condition Wilder demanded that would change comedy forever? From the very beginning, the studio executives hated Blazing Saddles. They thought the script was offensive, vulgar, and a commercial guaranteed to fail. They fought its creator at every turn, trying to censor its most vital scenes in a desperate attempt to bury the film before it ever saw the light of day. But trying to sanitize the script was only the beginning of their problems. The studio was making a film that mocked prejudice, yet behind the scenes, they were practicing it. They flat out refused to cast the film's brilliant co-writer, Richard Pryor, in the lead role he was born to play. They said his personal life was too controversial and that he was too dangerous for audiences, revealing a staggering hypocrisy. And that cynical decision was made only after the original production had already imploded. Few people know that on the very first day of shooting, the Oscar-winning actor hired to play the Waco Kid suddenly collapsed on set from a secret, personal struggle he had hidden from everyone. The entire multi-million-dollar production screeched to a halt, nearly dead on arrival. With his movie in shambles, the director made one desperate phone call to the only person he knew could save it. That person was Gene Wilder. He agreed to fly in and rescue the film, but he had one bizarre, non-negotiable condition for playing the part. It was a creative choice so strange it went against every rule of comedy and should have destroyed the movie's tone completely. That secret demand, the band creator, and the on-set disaster all add up to a story that is far crazier and more controversial than the film itself. We are about to expose all of it. If you love discovering the secret stories behind your favorite movies, make sure you subscribe right now before we dive into the details. The first day of shooting for Blazing Saddles was supposed to be a triumph. Director Mel Brooks had assembled a killer cast, and for the crucial role of the washed-up gunslinger, the Waco Kid, he'd hired the acclaimed Oscar-winning actor Gig Young. Young had the perfect look and the Hollywood pedigree to bring the character to life. The cameras were ready to roll on the very first scene, where the Waco Kid is introduced hanging upside down from his bunk. But as Young delivered his lines, a horrifying reality unfolded. He began shaking uncontrollably before suddenly collapsing on the set. Pandemonium erupted as the crew rushed to his side, but it quickly became clear this was a serious medical emergency. The truth was that Young was battling severe alcoholism, a struggle he had hidden from the production, and what everyone had just witnessed was an acute alcohol withdrawal. He was rushed to the hospital, and just like that, the production screeched to a halt. The film was already a risky bet, and now, without its co-star, it was on the verge of being shut down entirely. The project was turning into a nightmare, and Mel Brooks' ambitious vision was about to be buried before a single scene was even in the can. But what happened next was a stroke of desperate genius born from absolute chaos. With the studio ready to pull the plug, a panicked Mel Brooks scrambled for a solution. There was only one person he knew who had the unique blend of comedic timing and subtle depth to save the role: his friend, Gene Wilder. Brooks made a frantic, late-night phone call laying the whole disastrous situation bare. He explained that his star had collapsed, the production was frozen, and his dream project was turning to dust. He needed a miracle. On the other end of the line, Wilder listened patiently to the chaotic story, but he didn't ask about the script, he didn't negotiate a salary, and he didn't hesitate. His response was immediate and built on pure trust. "I'll be there. Within hours, Wilder had packed a bag and was on a plane, arriving on set less than a day after Gig Young's collapse. He was handed his costume and prop gun, ready to step into a role he knew almost nothing about, in a production he had just single-handedly rescued from oblivion. The arrival of Wilder was a jolt of electricity for the demoralized cast and crew. The movie was alive again. But saving the film came with a surprising catch, as Wilder had one very specific, non-negotiable condition for playing the part a creative choice. So unusual, it would define the character and the entire film. Before he even put on the costume, Gene Wilder laid out his one condition to Mel Brooks, and it was a shocker. He insisted that he would not play the Waco Kid for laughs. In a movie overflowing with slapstick, absurdity, and fourth-wall breaks, Wilder was determined to portray the legendary gunslinger as a genuinely broken man. He wanted to capture the quiet tragedy of a hero who had lost his way, delivering his lines with a straight-faced, mournful gravity. For any other comedy, this demand would be unthinkable. It went against every instinct of the genre. The film was a loud, frantic, and ridiculous farce. Yet Wilder wanted his character to exist in a bubble of authentic sorrow. Mel Brooks was momentarily stunned by the request. It was a massive creative gamble that could have clashed horribly with the film's chaotic tone. But Brooks trusted Wilder's instincts implicitly. He agreed, placing the soul of his movie in his friend's hands. Wilder believed that the film's wild comedy needed an emotional anchor to be truly effective. The Waco Kid wasn't a clown. He was a fallen idol. This seemingly bizarre choice was a stroke of genius, and it would soon become the secret weapon that made the whole film work. As filming progressed, the genius of Gene Wilder's strange condition became stunningly clear. On a set defined by pure pandemonium, his performance was an island of calm, while other characters were yelling, fighting, and breaking the fourth wall. Wilder's Waco Kid was often perfectly still, observing the madness with a look of profound weariness. This quietness didn't dampen the comedy, it amplified it. His deadpan, underplayed reactions made the surrounding chaos seem even more absurd, and the jokes land with twice the impact. He became the audience's anchor in a world gone mad. But, more importantly, his sincerity gave the film something it desperately needed: a heart. The growing friendship between the Waco Kid and Sheriff Bard felt real and earned because Wilder played his part not as a caricature, but as a man genuinely finding a reason to live again. You didn't just laugh at his lines. You felt the weight behind them. Mel Brooks himself later admitted that Wilder's grounded performance was the crucial element that kept the film from spiraling into a meaningless farce. It was the soul of the machine. The on-screen chemistry he created with actor Cleavon Little became iconic, but this legendary partnership was never the original plan. It was born only after the studio banned the man who was supposed to have the role, exposing the very prejudice the film was made to mock. The comedic genius originally slated to play Sheriff Bard was none other than Richard Pryor. This wasn't just a casting idea. Pryor was a fundamental creative force behind the movie, serving as one of the lead writers. His sharp, unfiltered perspective on race is woven into the very DNA of the script, and Mel Brooks had written the role of the sheriff specifically for him. Brooks knew that only Pryor possessed the raw, fearless energy to deliver such a controversial performance. The plan was set for a Wilder Pryor powerhouse, but the studio executives at Warner Brothers got cold feet. They were terrified of Pryor's public reputation, his history of substance use, and his unapologetic, often confrontational stand-up routines made him a massive liability in their eyes. Citing him as uninsurable, they formally blocked his casting, refusing to finance a film with him as the lead. The hypocrisy was staggering. The studio was bankrolling a groundbreaking satire about challenging prejudice, Yet they simultaneously vetoed its black co-creator because they deemed him too dangerous and unpredictable for mainstream audiences. They were profiting from a message of racial tolerance while actively sidelining the very artist who gave that message its authentic, fiery voice. The world would never see what a Pryor-led Blazing Saddles looked like, but this cynical corporate decision inadvertently opened the door for a different kind of magic to be born from the fallout. With Richard Pryor out, the role of Sheriff Bart went to the talented, Tony Award-winning stage actor Cleavon Little. He brought a completely different energy to the part, not the fiery, confrontational style of Pryor, but a cool, sophisticated intelligence. As Sheriff Bart was a man who met prejudice not with rage, but with a sly, knowing smile, constantly outsmarting the bigots around him. When he and Gene Wilder shared the screen, something unexpected happened. A new, quieter alliance formed. It wasn't the explosive chemistry Pryor might have brought. It was a bond built on subtle, mutual respect between two outsiders. Wilder's Waco Kid was an outcast haunted by his past, while Little's Sheriff Bart was an outcast because of his skin color. Together, they created a powerful dynamic of two lonely, capable men finding strength in one another. Their friendship became the film's undeniable heart, a sincere connection that grounded all the surrounding madness. It was a different kind of magic, one that was less about conflict and more about solidarity. While this powerful partnership blossomed on screen, a different battle was being waged behind the scenes. Mel Brooks was still under siege from studio executives, and it would take another, even quieter alliance with Wilder to save the film's most dangerous jokes from the chopping block. As the film neared completion, Mel Brooks screened it for the Warner Brothers executives, and their reaction was one of pure horror. They were appalled by what they saw. A list of mandatory cuts was handed down, targeting the film's most iconic and provocative scenes. The studio demanded the removal of the constant use of racial slurs, the entire campfire scene, and any joke they deemed too vulgar or offensive. They wanted to gut the movie, sanding down its sharp edges to create something safe and commercially viable. Brooks was in an impossible position, facing immense pressure to compromise his vision or risk the studio burying the film entirely. But behind the scenes, he had a secret ally. Gene Wilder quietly became the guardian of the film's integrity. He repeatedly took Brooks aside, privately encouraging him to stand his ground and refuse the cuts. Wilder understood that the film's power was in its discomfort. He argued that if you took away the raw, offensive language and the shocking gags, you weren't just weakening the comedy, you were destroying its entire satirical point. Bolstered by Wilder's unwavering support, Brooks fought back and, miraculously, he won. The film was released almost entirely as intended, but it was amidst this stressful, high-stakes battle for creative control that another legendary idea was quietly being born in the background. In the midst of all the on-set chaos and off-set battles, something entirely new was taking shape. During the lulls in filming, Gene Wilder approached Mel Brooks with a fledgling idea. He pictured a story about a descendant of the infamous Victor Frankenstein, a sophisticated man of science, so deeply ashamed of his family's monstrous legacy that he insisted his name be pronounced Frankenstein. That single, brilliant seed of an idea was all Brooks needed to hear. The two of them immediately lit up, and in the downtime between takes for Blazing Saddles, they began outlining their next project. They would scribble notes on scrap paper and napkins, building the world of what would become Young Frankenstein. This wasn't just a casual chat. It was the birth of a second masterpiece, conceived in the shadow of the first. For Gene Wilder, this marked a pivotal evolution in his career. He wasn't just a star anymore. He was now the co-writer and creative partner, proving he was a brilliant comedic mind in his own right. The fact that two of the greatest comedies of all time were born from the same chaotic period is a testament to their incredible partnership, proving that true genius doesn't just thrive in chaos, it uses it as fuel. When you look back on the story of Blazing Saddles, it becomes clear that the film wasn't just a movie, it was a miracle. It was a perfect storm of near disasters that, by some fluke of cinematic history, resulted in pure genius. The production should have collapsed on the very first day. It should have buckled under the weight of studio censorship and the controversy of banning its own co-creator. By all logic, it should have failed. But it was saved by a series of brave, counterintuitive choices. It was saved by a last-minute phone call, an actor's insistence on playing sorrow instead of slapstick, and a quiet alliance that protected the film's dangerous, vital message. Gene Wilder's role went far beyond just playing the Waco Kid. He was the film's anchor in a sea of chaos, its unexpected conscience. It proves that sometimes the greatest art isn't born from a perfect plan, but from the brilliant and defiant way its creators navigate an absolute mess. It leaves you wondering how many other masterpieces we lost simply because they didn't have their own hero step in at the final second. So, what's your favorite Gene Wilder movie? Tell us in the comments. And if you want more stories behind the classics, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications.